It was a normal day at home. Clara was taking a shower while I was making coffee in the kitchen. "Ethan, can you grab my phone?" Clara calls from upstairs. It's probably the email from the contractors about the Westbrook project. I reach for her phone. We've been married for 10 years, and she's never had a problem with me looking at it before. "Coming!" I shout, realizing the shower is still on. I turned on her phone to check for the email. Instead of seeing her email inbox, though, I saw a message pop up on the screen from a person I didn't recognize. My heart began to beat faster as I read the text. "Miss you already. Last night was incredible. I couldn't believe what I was reading, and then my heart really started to pound when I saw the time it was sent. 2:47 a.m. I was standing there in the kitchen, looking at her phone, and I felt my whole world spinning out of control. It was like the floor had dropped out from beneath me, and I was plummeting into an abyss, and the whole time I could hear the water running in the shower upstairs. It took me a few seconds to regain my bearings, and finally, I was able to move. I didn't even realize it as I began to walk to my home office, still holding my wife's phone in my hand. I read the messages again. "Ethan, did you get the email?" Clara calls from the bathroom, her words slightly obscured by the shower running. I couldn't respond. As soon as I stepped inside my office, I closed the door and locked it. I was alone now, but I didn't feel safe. The sunlight shone through the large windows behind my desk. I sat down and tried to calm myself. I had to focus on my work. I had to finish the Westbrook project. I looked at the plans on my desk, but I couldn't concentrate. I picked up my phone and reread the conversation. "Looking forward to tonight. He's working late on the Westbrook plans. Meeting at the usual place, that little spot off Madison? The dates go back weeks, months. How long? I try to think of every night out, every time my husband was away on business, every time Nick came over for dinner. There's a knock at the door and I jump. "Babe, you okay?" Clara's voice was nearer now. "I'm gonna have to leave soon. Just checking my email," I said, trying to keep my voice as calm as possible. "Are you sure?" A pause. "Nick is coming by later to pick up those golf clubs he left here. Can you put them by the door?" The golf clubs, of course. That's why he kept coming over when I was busy working. I clench my fists, my nails digging into my palms. "Yeah, all right," I say. I heard her heels clicking down the hallway, then the front door opening and closing, and finally the sound of her car starting in the driveway. A few seconds later, she was gone. And I was left alone with my thoughts. All of those memories were coming back to me now, and with them, the realization that this was not an isolated incident. There were other times, other clues that I had missed. People had been laughing at me behind my back, talking about me behind my back. I pulled out my laptop and began to search through emails, bank statements, credit card bills. My phone buzzed with an incoming text message. "Hey man, we're still on for 2 o'clock for those clubs, right? Brother." I look at the text for so long that the screen goes dark. It's brighter in the room now. I pick up a bottle of whiskey from the drawer and pour myself a glass. It was a gift from Clara. I take a couple of sips, and then I open a word processor on my laptop and begin to type a list of rules. I need a plan. I'm in the middle of it when my phone buzzes again. "Hey, saw Clara leaving super early again. Is everything all right? You guys didn't come to book club last week." I imagine her saying the words, repeating them to herself like a mantra. She has no idea how true those words will be. I continue to write the story. As I drink more of the scotch, the story expands and becomes far more detailed. I think I'm going to give it a beginning, middle, and end. The story is a lot more complicated than I initially thought, but I think I can fit all of it into this document. I receive another text from Nick. "Changed plans. Can I come by now instead?" I hesitate to respond. I want to make sure I have the story down before I talk to him. "Sure," I respond. "Come on over, brother." I got up and looked out the window, seeing the cars going up and down the street in front of our home. The neighbors were out and about, and I saw Jessica Palmer across the street, watering her roses and checking her phone at the same time. Clara's boss's house was visible just down the street, at the corner. I picked up the scotch and took a sip, contemplating how the light shone through it. It really was a beautiful thing. But then, so was my marriage, and my friendships, and my life. The sound of a car door slamming interrupted my thoughts. I went to the window and saw Nick's Range Rover parked in the driveway. He was just coming up the front steps of our house. A moment later, the doorbell rang. I went back to my computer and saved my work. I closed the lid and looked out the window, fixing my tie in the reflection. An architect always makes sure his foundation is solid before beginning construction. and this was going to have to be perfect. The doorbell rang again. I took another long sip of scotch, then put the glass down and went to let Nick inside. We talked for nearly 3 hours, about everything and nothing. I told him about Clara's business trip, and we discussed work and family. It was a long conversation, and afterwards I was left feeling a bit drained. But it had accomplished what I needed it to. As the light began to fail, I sat in the darkness of my study and thought about what I would do next. Once Nick is gone, I feel a strange sense of emptiness, as well as a hopeful anticipation. The golf clubs are still here. He forgot them, possibly on purpose. Maybe that was part of his plan? I can't be sure. I don't feel like responding to Jessica anymore, so I ignore her text. Instead, I sit down at my computer and create a new folder. The first step is to collect all the evidence I can find that proves my relationship with Nick has been nothing but a lie, but I need to do it in a manner which doesn't raise any suspicions. This is going to be a long process, and I need to stay organized. I start with my computer. Nick and I have shared a lot of photos and documents over the years. I download everything I can find. Search history, I say to myself, opening a new terminal window. You gotta check the bones before you can build. Clara's password is easy to guess. It's Nick's birthday. I connect remotely to her computer, something I had set up some years back so that we could share files with each other. I was always the techie in the family. Reading through her emails, I see nothing suspicious at first, but then I notice a lot of deleted calendar entries and fake meetings that she would have been at when she would have had time to meet with Nick. I pick up my phone and call someone. David, it's Ethan Mitchell. You know that security gear you were going to install for the Peterson job? Ethan, hey, you reconsidering the new security system? Yeah, a little bit. How fast can you get me a full set of recording equipment? I can have it to you today, but it's going to be I'm not worried about the price. I need privacy. Got it. I'll have someone deliver it to you in under an hour. Almost an hour later, the doorbell rang. The package arrived containing the cameras and other equipment I had ordered. My phone buzzed again. Staying late tonight. Don't wait up. I texted back a reply. No problem. Take care. The smiley face felt like a betrayal, but I had to play my part. Sometimes you have to speak the language of deceit to uncover it. The first camera went up above the door, disguised as a smoke detector. The second, third, and fourth went up in the living room, kitchen, and hallway. I was testing the feed when I saw Jessica Palmer appear at her window across the street. She was talking on her phone, staring at our house. I should make some coffee, I say out loud to no one in particular, just to see if I hear it on the recording. I do. The sound quality is good. Even a whisper would be picked up. The sun was setting by the time I was finished. I looked at Clara's purse sitting by the door and thought about how it would be good to hear her talking when she wasn't at home too. I put a small recording device in her purse, hidden in the inner pocket. It was smaller than a credit card and would be impossible to find unless you were looking for it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Nick. Hey brother, about today. I didn't respond. I had nothing to say to him. The house was dark and quiet as night fell. I sat in my office staring at my laptop, looking at the 4 windows on the screen. All of them showed empty rooms, waiting for Clara to come home. At 11:43 p.m., she finally did. I watched her come in on the main feed, holding her heels in her hands as she tiptoed inside, thinking I was asleep. Ethan? She asks. In the office, I reply back, pulling up the notes I've been keeping. She stood in the doorway, looking tired and ready for bed. You're not asleep yet? You should get some rest, honey. Just working late. How'd the meeting go? Good. Long. You know. I nodded. I do know how it goes. She leaned in and kissed me on the cheek, hesitating for a moment. Don't stay up too late. I could smell a man's cologne on her. Clara? She stopped in the doorway. Yeah? Good night. She smiles at me and walks away. I return to the living room and open a new document on my laptop. I write down the date and then start summarizing my findings of the day. The only sound in the house is the shower running upstairs. I look at the 4 windows on my screen. They are still recording. They will record everything from now on. I save the document and shut down the laptop. This day has been full of new information, but I'm sure there will be more tomorrow. This was just the beginning. And to build a house, you must start with the foundation. I got to work a bit before noon, still feeling strange and conflicted about everything that had happened. It had been 3 days since I found out about Clara's affair, and there had been no further revelations. She'd stayed late at work every night since then, and I'd recorded everything, but so far I hadn't found anything useful. I stepped off the elevator on the 14th floor and was greeted by the receptionist. "Mr. Mitchell, what a surprise to see you at lunch." "Left some paperwork for the Westbrook pitch," I reply, my smile automatic. I didn't run into too many people on the way to the conference room since most of them were out for lunch, but that was a good thing. I wanted to avoid any unnecessary attention. I entered the room and sat down in front of the laptop. "Let's undo your paradise, Clara," I say aloud, ready to type. I created the email account yesterday using a VPN. It was easy and anonymous, and now I was sending a new email to Clara's boss, Thomas Reynolds. Just as I was about to hit send, my phone rang. "Yo, bro, where the fuck have you been? It's been days. You good?" I mute the phone and drag it to the other side of the table. I need to focus. 3 times I rewrite the subject line before I settle on urgent, ethics violation report, Clara Mitchell. Someone walks past outside. I stop typing and look toward the door. The person continues down the corridor. "Dear Mr. Reynolds, I am writing to bring to your attention several serious ethical violations involving Clara Mitchell and senior management. I attach a few files. Most of them are photos, voice recordings, and emails from the device in her purse, but there are other things too. Credit card receipts for dinners paid for by a third party on nights when she claimed to be working late. Location data from her phone showing she was at a hotel with someone else during a client meeting. I select a few of the audio recordings that I think will best get the message across and attach them too." Someone walks past outside again. I hold my breath until they're gone. Finally, I attach the images Jessica Palmer kindly helped me obtain after we talked anonymously yesterday. It was easy to get her to help. I knew she would jump at the chance to cause some chaos. "Helping a friend," she'd said, her eyes lighting up with self-righteous fury. I've had my suspicions for a while now. I read through the email 3 times, making sure I attached everything, all in a way that would cause the most damage. My phone buzzed again. "Grabbing lunch with the team. I have a big presentation tomorrow, so I'll be home late tonight." I took a screenshot of it to add to my growing collection of evidence. I heard laughter from the break room somewhere nearby, the muffled sounds of people talking and drinking coffee. "Okay?" I asked myself. I hesitated for a split second before sending it. I imagined Clara at her desk, thinking she had it all figured out. I pictured her boss and the HR staff getting back to work after lunch, not knowing what was about to hit them. Then I clicked send. There was no noise, no big celebration, just the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of people talking out in the hallway. I closed up my laptop and put the chair back exactly as I had found it. Then I opened the door. Sarah looked up at me as I walked out. "Did you find what you were looking for, Mr. Mitchell?" "All present and accounted for." The elevator doors opened and I got on, hearing my phone buzz one last time as I did. I picked it up and saw a text from an unknown number. "Got your package, thank you. I will keep this secret." The elevator doors closed in front of me, and I saw my reflection in the mirrored finish on the steel. I always love a bit of symmetry, and so I had scheduled the email to be sent at 2 p.m., just as HR was checking their emails for the day. I sat in my car for a few minutes before leaving, looking at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't like what I saw. Phase 1, I tell my reflection. I back the car out of the garage. I get out into the street and drive away. No one around me knows that I've just started the countdown to my ex-wife's downfall. It's 1:47 p.m. right now. In 13 minutes, Clara's life will start to fall apart. Someone calls me. It's Nick. "Hey, bro, we gotta talk. It's not what you think." I chuckled. If only he knew. This is just the first step. You have to take out the foundation before you can bring down the entire building. The light turned green and I drove off. I already knew what I was going to do next. Ruining his career was just the tip of the iceberg. He deserved much worse than that. I spent the rest of the day driving around the city, ignoring the calls and the messages as the chaos unfolded. When the sun began to set and the sky turned orange, I headed home. Driving home from work, I felt the weight of what I'd done, each mile a countdown to the confrontation I was about to have. The calls hadn't stopped coming since 2:17 p.m., 17 minutes after my email had arrived in the HR inbox. I hadn't answered a single one of them. I pulled into the garage, relieved to see that Clara hadn't come home yet. She had told me she was going to be late because of a meeting at work. I knew that was a lie, but it didn't matter anymore. I took a deep breath and opened the front door, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the empty house. I checked the security cameras on my phone, making sure Clara wasn't hiding somewhere inside. I needed to be alone for this. The time was 6:43 p.m. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Jessica Palmer. "Hey, bud, you and Clara doing all right? Haven't seen her car around much lately." I was waiting for her to say that. "Hey, Jessica, I need your opinion on something." Her response is instantaneous. "Sure, what do you want to talk about?" I sit down in front of my computer and open up the first screenshot and recording. It was from the book club meeting last month when I had caught Clara and Jessica gossiping in the kitchen. You remember when you asked Clara about all those work trips she was taking to the Madison Hotel? The typing dots appear and disappear several times before she responds. "Oh, Ethan, I was so scared. I don't know how to say this." I take a sip of scotch and pause, thinking about my neighbors who would love to hear this story. Wouldn't you agree that it's about time everyone knew? My finger is on the send button. I look out the window and see her talking on the phone in the kitchen. "It would destroy her," Jessica replies. "Interesting. That's what she said about you and Tom from the golf club." 2 more minutes pass in silence. She stops moving in her window. "Did she mention Tom?" I send her Clara's voice. "Poor Jessica thinks nobody knows about her and Tom. Can you imagine what would happen if Richard found out?" Jessica answers, "That fucking bitch. Give me everything." 1-to-1, I think, and open the group chat. The last message is something about a meeting in the community garden tomorrow. I attach the first screenshot. "Not to cut you off, but I thought it would be fun for everyone to learn what we're growing here." Responses began coming in almost immediately. Confusion at first, then shocked reactions as I revealed more and more proof of what I had seen. "What the fuck? No way." "Clara? Our Clara?" Jessica chimed in at the perfect moment. "I can confirm everything, and there's more." The group chat exploded. I could see how the number of unread messages increased rapidly. 47, 83, 126. Clara's life was about to fall apart. Nick called me again. I watched it ring and eventually go to voicemail. "Mrs. Henderson from number 42. I always knew something wasn't right. Remember the Christmas party?" I could see lights being turned on throughout the neighborhood. "I know stuff about other people too," Jessica types back, venting her own stream of knowledge. I sit back and watch the chaos unfold. Whoever started sending out those texts to everyone in the group is ruining Clara's reputation in a matter of seconds. Richard Palmer sends me a private message. "Is this why Tom stepped down from the club last week? Maybe you should ask Jessica." I respond. Another message appeared in the group chat. Clara. "What the hell is this? Ethan?" I saw the 3 dots appear as she was typing, then disappear. "I can explain everything," she types. "Can you explain the Madison Hotel?" Jessica jumps in. "Or the missing charity funds?" Mrs. Henderson adds. "Or Nick," I type. My first direct contribution to the feeding frenzy. The typing dots blink on and off one more time, then Clara's profile pic turns to gray, indicating she's offline. My phone rings again, showing her private number. I ignore it, and instead look out the window at the street. The lights are turning on in all of the houses, and I can see silhouettes moving behind the curtains. Some of them are talking on the phone. A new message pops up in the group chat. It's from Barbara, one of the board members of the HOA. "Emergency community meeting tomorrow night. Attendance mandatory." I chuckle to myself. Clara was so proud of becoming the president of the HOA last year. Now she's losing her neighborhood kingdom, her job, her friends, and her family, all in one day. The text messages stop coming. Then, just as I'm about to turn off my phone, I get another one. It's from Nick. "You've made your point, but you don't know everything." I take another sip of my scotch, my eyes fixed on Jessica's silhouette. She's moving more rapidly now, gesturing with her hands as she talks to Richard. "I know enough," I respond to Nick. "Soon, I'll know it all." It's dark outside. Everyone is home, but no one is asleep. I can see it in the windows. Tomorrow, though, the real show will begin. 9:17 p.m. Clara is still not home. It's amazing how quickly you can bring down a building if you just remove the right support. Tomorrow's community meeting will be the final blow. I pour myself another drink and sit back to enjoy the show. 3 days earlier, I had already set the neighborhood on fire from the comfort of my own home. Now, I was preparing to host it. The community meeting had gone just as I had planned, maybe even a little better. The seed of chaos that I had planted had grown into a full-scale war, tearing the neighborhood apart. I hadn't heard from Clara since, but that was also part of my plan. I had watched the fire burn over the last few days, and tonight I was going to welcome everyone into my home for a poker game and pretend like nothing had happened. I got up from my observation post at the window to open the door for my guests. Later that night, I was getting ready to host poker night. The guys were just starting to show up, and I saw them parking their cars on my driveway, looking out my office window. Mark was the first to arrive. He was driving a Tesla, I noticed. David pulled up next, in a Range Rover. A similar model to the one Nick drove, I thought with rising anger. The son of a bitch. I straightened my tie and put on my most charming smile, then went to the door to greet them. "You're gonna need it," I say, forcing a smile. David gets here with Chris and Tom. We talk a little bit before we start playing, but the mood is different. They all saw the post. They all know. "Nick coming?" Chris asks, and he's not very good at pretending to be casual. "Oh, he's coming." I start laying out the poker table. The chips are perfectly stacked. The cards are perfectly arranged. Tom was about to say something else when the doorbell rang. Nick was standing in the doorway, looking at me with a nervous smile. "Hi, brother," he said. "Come in," I say, keeping a close eye on him as he walks through the door. The others greet him awkwardly. Nick sits down in his usual spot, facing the window. "Standard bet, yeah?" Mark says, trying to get us back into the swing of things. "Let's make it interesting," I say, getting some drinks ready. "I think we should raise the stakes tonight." I dealt the first hand, and the game began just like any other. "Eventful week," I say to the silence, "full of surprises." Nick paused as he was stacking up his chips again. "Ethan, 2 weeks ago," I continue, stacking my cards like a house of cards, "you had dinner at the Madison Hotel, room service for 2 at 9:47 p.m. Funny place for dinner, considering Clara was in Philadelphia." David folded immediately, sitting back with his drink, and the others looked at their cards as if they were written in a foreign language. "You don't get it," Nick says. "The receipts were 6 months old, the texts nearly a year. Did I get those wrong?" Tom fidgeted with his chips. Mark took a sip of his drink. "It wasn't," Nick croaks. "We didn't want to—" "Get busted?" I say, folding. The hand played out in silence. Chris won, but barely touched the pot. "So, how long have you guys known?" I ask them. My question hits them like a bomb. Mark looks down at his drink. David looks up at the ceiling. "Jesus, Ethan." Tom sighs. "We thought so, but we weren't sure. You're our family, man." "Family," I mutter back. Interesting choice of words. He stood up from the table and said, "I should go." "Take a seat." I say it gently, calmly. "The game's not over." "But there's nothing left to bet," Nick replies, but he sits down anyway. I dealt another hand, watching Nick's face as I said, "Why don't you tell them what happened on New Year's Eve, when Clara was visiting her sister?" Nick went pale. David's reflection in the window behind him was saying, "Jesus Christ," as he took a sip of scotch. "Or how about the clients who you never met with? The money you never donated to charity? The fake stories you two invented while I was busy inventing real buildings?" "It wasn't like that," Nick mumbles. "What wasn't it like?" Mark adds, finding his own voice. "Because it sounds to me like you betrayed all of us." The air conditioning was buzzing. "I fold," Chris says, "even though we haven't started playing yet." I pour another round of drinks for everyone, lining up the glasses perfectly on the table. "You know what you learn in architect school? That if you take out the wrong support beam, the whole house comes crashing down." Nick spilled his chips on the table, his hands trembling. "Ethan, I beg you—" "All right, your turn to shuffle," I tell him, passing him the cards. "Or are you too shaky?" He fumbled with the cards, dropping a few of them on the floor, but nobody offered to help him pick them up. "Okay, I think we're done," David says, getting to his feet. The others get up as well, abandoning their chips. Nick didn't stand up. He just looked at the cards on the floor and said, "What do you want?" "Nothing," I say, picking up the discarded chips one by one, carefully. "You already gave me what I wanted, the truth." At long last, they all got up and left. Nick was the last one out. "For what it's worth," he says, "I'm sorry." "Worth?" I smile, but not genuinely. "Okay, let's see here. A night in the executive suite at the Madison Hotel, $847. Clara's charity money, $23,450. Your friendship, Apparently priceless. The door shut behind him. I watched through my window as he drove off. Clara called me again. It was her 37th attempt since I wrote that message to the group chat. I turned off my phone and sat down by the poker table to put things back in order. It didn't take long. I was meticulous and thorough in my work, placing each card in the deck with precision. Clara hadn't been kicked out yet, but she would be soon enough. It was all in motion now, and I had burned a bridge today. It was a sad thing, but it had to be done. I poured myself a glass of scotch and held it up in front of me. "Check and raise," I said. I didn't drink the scotch. Instead, I sat down in front of my computer and gathered all the evidence I had, both the photos and the videos, and compiled it into a single document, which I then printed. It took me all night. I went to bed at dawn, only to get up right away and put on my clothes. I had made an appointment with a lawyer, and I had to hurry if I wanted to get there on time. A ray of sun was shining through the blinds of the lawyer's office, casting a shadow over the desk where my folder of evidence lay. It had been a week since the poker night. Word of what had happened had spread to everyone. The lawyer was still looking over my paperwork. "This is very comprehensive, Ethan," he says, flipping through another page. "The surveillance footage would have been enough, but the paper trail." "I'm an architect," I reply, adjusting my tie. "It's all about the blueprint." He nods, reaching for his coffee mug that says, "Trust me, I'm a lawyer." A Christmas gift from Clara and me back when we still bought gifts for our lawyer. "How'd the HOA meeting go last night? We voted to have me removed as president. Jessica Palmer made a very convincing argument." Marcus returns a half smile. "Ah yes, Mrs. Palmer. Her testimony about what happened in the Madison Hotel is interesting." The clock on the wall ticks down the minutes until my marriage will be completely annihilated. Cars honk outside, and I can hear the steady flow of traffic from the street below. "Clara's lawyer has been reaching out," Marcus says, putting the file away. "Quite frequently." "I'm sure she has. They want to discuss a possible settlement." I sat back in my chair, feeling the comfort of the leather beneath me. "No," I said. "It might be quicker, maybe even more cost-effective." "I don't give a shit about quicker or cost-effective," I cut her off, with the same tone I use when inspecting building plans. "I want a paper trail. I want everything out in the open." He took off his glasses and rubbed them with a handkerchief. "Her reputation will be ruined. The ethics violation report to her law firm alone has already led to her suspension pending investigation," I say. "I'm aware." "And Nick Warner?" "Resigned from the golf club yesterday. Apparently he's selling his house. Jessica's my go-to for gossip about the hood." He put his glasses back on and gave me a scrutinizing look, as if he'd seen this exact situation 100 times before. "You know it's going to get messy. It got messy when I found those texts. Now it's just getting real." His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Cohen, Mrs. Mitchell's lawyer is online too. Again." He glanced at me as if to confirm. I nodded. "Send her in," he says. Sandra Whitman's voice came over the speaker. "Marcus, you don't have to go nuclear. My client is prepared to—" "Your client," I cut her off, leaning towards the phone, "gave up her negotiating powers when she gave up her soul." There was a pause. "Mr. Mitchell, I didn't know you were there. Wherever you are, Sandra, I see you. I write everything down. Do you want to hear about the offshore account Clara set up 3 months ago, or the forged charity books?" She hesitated again, this time for a little longer. "Let's talk about this in the right forums." "This is the right forum," Marcus cuts him off calmly. "Your client will be served tomorrow morning. I recommend you go through the evidence package thoroughly before you try negotiating with us a second time." He hung up. That was blunt. "We don't build on shaky ground," I say, getting up to gaze out the window. We demolish and begin again. I get another message from Nick, but I ignore it. "I've got a temporary restraining order here," Marcus says, reaching for another sheet of paper. "Based on the security footage and the threatening text messages she sent you last night." "Include Nick," I say, still staring down at the cars below. "I don't want either of them within 100 yards of me." He makes some notes, and a window cleaner descends outside, cleaning the window. "Sign here," Marcus says, "and here, initial here and here." With each signature, I felt like I was tearing down another piece of my old life. "What do you do now?" Marcus asks, gathering up the signatures. "I'll have to speak with the church board. I've got a meeting with them tomorrow and, well, they're definitely going to want to talk about Clara's position as treasurer after everything." "And after that?" I look away from the window, seeing my reflection in his desk. I do look more defined. Then I rebuild. But first, we complete the demolition. I nodded, understanding. One more thing, he says, grabbing one last piece of paper. The will. Removing Clara as your beneficiary and executor? Yeah, and I want to add a provision about releasing all the evidence should I die an untimely death. He stopped, almost ready to drop his pen. Is that really necessary? I think it's important to have things clear, even after death. We put the finishing touches on the paperwork, and a moment later, he was walking me to the door of his office. They'll be served at 9 a.m. tomorrow, he says. You sure you don't want to see it? Yeah, I'll be at the church board meeting, watching the security camera footage on my phone. He patted my shoulder. Try to get some sleep, Ethan. You're going to need it for the demolition work. I walked over to the elevator and hit the button, checking my phone as I waited for it to arrive. Another text from Jessica Palmer. She probably wanted to tell me where Clara was or what she was doing. It was all coming together, I thought with excitement. Everything was falling into place, and soon I would be ready to start building something new. But first, I had to finish the demolition. And I had to prepare for the church board meeting tomorrow. The treasurer's report was going to be very detailed and difficult to explain. Over the next few weeks, I set things into motion. I took my time and made sure everything went off without a hitch. Just as I had planned, by the end of it, Clara's reputation was left in tatters. And now that October was coming to a close, it was time to take the next step. The windows are half empty. It's been 3 weeks since the church board meeting, and now Clara has finally begun moving out her belongings. I watch her carry another box of clothes up the stairs. Her art collection is gone. Her books are gone. Soon, all traces of her life in the house will be gone too. The clock ticks in the background. Most of it's packed, Clara shouts down, her voice strained but calm. The movers come tomorrow for the furniture, what we agreed on. Okay. She stopped at the top of the stairs. Ethan, stop. There's a long pause. Looking through my office window, I see Jessica Palmer standing by her front window. I wonder if she's already calling me. Clara comes down the stairs. I notice that she's lost weight since the last time I saw her at the HOA meeting. She's wearing the same blazer, but now it looks a little too big for her. I didn't mean to get caught or to ruin everything we made. She winced at my architectural jargon. Both. Neither. I'm not sure. She's wringing her hands, a nervous tic I always thought was cute. Things are just so fucked up. Structural damage, I say, reorganizing a pile of papers on the desk. If you mess with the foundation, the entire building is at risk. I see Nick's Range Rover drive slowly past our house, trying to get a look at the damage he caused. Since the restraining order, that's all he can do. The charity board's threatening to sue, I say, observing her in the window's reflection. Marcus already told me. She sits down on the couch, the leather one she's leaving behind. I'll pay them back. With what? Your suspended wages? Nick's golf club fees? It's 4 o'clock now, and the rooms are getting emptier. I did love you, she says. That's not a lie. I look at her, thinking of the mending and repair work needed for the ceiling. Love without trust is just a fresh coat of paint, and you know all about that, don't you? A car door slams shut outside. Jessica is on her way to her daily reconnaissance. Goodbye, house, Clara says, tracing the leather armrest with her fingers. You're saying goodbye to the idea of the house, the ideal life, the ideal image. I adjust my tie, an affectation I maintained even after we tore it down. The HOA president, the seat on the charity board, the office with a view, all the sleek modern touches of your fantasy. She got up and went to the door. I should pack my things. Yes, you do. Her heels clack on the marble floor as she leaves us. She stops at the foot of the staircase. What are you going to say? The truth. I step toward the door of my office. Though Jessica's already likely taken care of most of that. She smiles just a little. She did have a way of getting things out there quickly. More effective than we realized. Her grin faded. She took a few steps up, then paused. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Worth, I say, thinking back to poker night with Nick. Let's not talk about worth. She didn't respond, just nodded and went upstairs. I could hear her packing up her things. My phone rang again. It was Marcus, calling to give me updates about the ongoing negotiations. I ignored his call and walked up to the window. The sun was out, and I could see our neighbors peeking out through the curtains of their windows, watching us with their phones in their hands. The jewelry box, Clara says from upstairs, that we got in Venice. Forget it, I reply. I'll put it in the list for Marcus. The sound of a box being closed and taped up, then more silence. 15 minutes passed. I tidied up some magazines on the coffee table, straightening them into a neat pile. Eventually my wife came down the stairs with the last suitcase. "That's everything," she says, putting the suitcase down at the door. "For now." I nodded and remained standing by the window. "Your key." She dug into her purse and pulled out a small key, then left it on the table by the door. "See you, Ethan." I turn around and look at her. "Goodbye, Clara." She opens the front door and leaves. I watch her walk over to her car, her shoulders trembling slightly, but not enough to make her steps unsteady. Jessica Palmer is standing on her front porch, recording my wife's exit, as if to prove to the entire neighborhood that this actually happened. I go through the house and look at the empty spaces on the walls and in the bookshelves. There is only one coffee cup in the kitchen drainboard, mine. Another text from Marcus. "Got the papers ready. Can we meet tomorrow at 10? "Good," I reply. "Let's get you back together again." At 4:30, the grandfather clock chimed. I put the pillow back in place, then looked around at the mess I had created. The sun continued to set, casting its light on the now empty walls and floor. I would start planning the new layout for the house tomorrow. For now, I had some scotch and drank it while watching my reflection in the window. I thought about how much easier it was to see the architecture of the house with all those unnecessary interior decorations gone. I was too tired to do anything else, so I went to bed. The night passed, and when I woke up, I started my morning routine. The sun rose over the city and shone on the house as if it was the first time it had ever done so. The sunlight comes through the windows differently now that Clara's curtains are gone. I hadn't realized how much I appreciated minimalism until I saw the place without her furniture. The emptiness of the rooms, the blank spaces, the way the sound changed and began to echo. I've moved my drafting table into the living room where her couch used to be. It gets the best light in the morning. I have a fresh stack of paper to work with, and my pencils are freshly sharpened. I can't wait to get started. My phone buzzes. It must be Jessica Palmer. I ignore it. "Good morning, Mr. Mitchell," my smart home system chimes in. "The time is 7:43 a.m. The current temperature is 62 degrees. "Thanks, Helena," I say, having replaced Clara's James with a version that feels more appropriate. "Any messages?" You have 3 voicemails from Nicholas Warner, 1 email from Marcus Cohen about the final terms of the settlement, 14 neighborhood watch alerts about suspicious activity. I smiled at the last one. Jessica had been writing down the make and model of every single car that drove past my house. Clear the voicemails, mark Marcus's email as unread. I draw the first couple of lines, forming a shopping center with a few quick strokes. It's the new project for the Whitman Group. Funny, considering Sandra Whitman is still trying to buy Clara from me. The phone on my desk rings. Ethan Mitchell. "Mr. Mitchell, it's Sarah. The Whitman Group wants to know if you can reschedule next week's presentation to an earlier date. They sound excited." I look at the shape in front of me, imagining different ways to proceed with it. "Tell them I can do tomorrow morning. I'm making good progress." "Oh, that's wonderful. I'll pass it on." She sounds surprised. The old Ethan Mitchell would have needed a few days to come up with a good excuse, but simplicity breeds clarity. The doorbell rings. I look through the window and see David outside. "Come in," I say, continuing to type away. He stopped in the doorway and looked around. "Fuck, Ethan, it's a piece of architecture?" He chuckled nervously. I was going to say empty. "Form follows function," I answer, as I draw another line. "Coffee?" "Yeah." I brought him into the kitchen and showed him the new coffee machine I had bought to replace the fancy cappuccino machine that had belonged to Clara. "The guys are worried about you," David says, taking a plain white mug, the whole matching set dropped off at Goodwill yesterday. "The guys should worry about their own foundations." David seems a little uncomfortable at this point. "I guess we should have warned you about poker night." I begin to weigh coffee beans on the scale. 200-degree water, I continue, pretending not to hear him. 90-second bloom, 4 minutes and 15 seconds of total extraction. "Ethan?" "Details matter, David, in coffee, in building design, in friendship." He put his mug down. "Nick's leaving." "I do. Jessica's morning briefing had multiple pictures of moving vans." The coffee machine lets out another puff of steam. "He wanted me to tell you." "I don't care what he has to say." I pour the coffee. "Nailed it." David took his cup back and looked at me as he drank. People in the neighborhood have been talking about how you've changed. Everybody in the neighborhood's been talking about it. Jessica tells them, I saw Mrs. Henderson walk by outside, holding up her cell phone as if she were filming us through the window. The Whitman Project, I answer, making my way back to my drafting table. You want to see something cool? He seemed relieved to be talking about something else. These lines here, I say, pointing with my pencil, are where past and future meet. Old architecture, new plans. But notice how the original foundation needs to be torn out, David says, suddenly getting it. Yeah, sometimes you can't build new things on bad foundations. Another notification came in, this time from Marcus Cohen. I ignored it. Will you ever talk to them again? David asked quietly. Either of them? I draw a line, connecting one part of the design to another. It's all about the spaces, David. The spaces we build. The spaces we don't. The spaces between what is and what might become. He sighed, realizing I hadn't really answered his question. Poker's at Mark's place tonight. You could... Thanks, but no thanks. I have things to get done. I point at the design forming. An artist must create. He places the cup on a coaster. I'll be right back, all right? I looked up at him. I'm not gone, David. I'm being put back together. After he leaves, I go back to my drawings, continuing to add to them with my usual precision. I draw, and with each new line I find a new way to build my life from this point forward. Jessica Palmer calls me again, this time to tell me Clara has found a new place to live on the other side of town. I don't answer. My phone goes silent, and I focus on the geometry. The sun rises behind the hills in the east and shines its light through the large windows of my office. I can hear people talking outside, and I wonder if they are talking about me. I wonder if they are talking about the architect who erased his past. I smile faintly and make another line on my drawing. They can talk all they want. I have a new life to build. I stay in my office until it gets dark. Then I go home, take a shower, and prepare for my dinner with my friends at Marina Point. The smell of the ocean fills my nostrils as I stand on the pier, straightening my tie. Old habits die hard. It's been 6 months since Clara left me, and I'm still trying to figure out how to rebuild my life from scratch. David suggested we do it here at Marina Point. I thought it was a bit too public, but now that I see the barbecue being set up by Tom and Mark, and Chris arranging chairs around a table, I suppose it makes sense. Great, you found a table, Jessica says, heading over at her usual brisk pace. Saw Clara's BMW cruising by in the parking lot. That's what the restraining order's for, I say, taking the bottle of wine she brought. And she won't make that mistake again. Richard came back just then. Hey, architect, thanks for the contractor recommendations. Looks like someone knows how to renovate, I say. I see Jessica holding his hand now. At least their marriage was repaired during my demolition, I think to myself. The sun sets over the lake, casting a warm glow over the parking lot. Other cars arrive, carrying neighbors, co-workers, and family friends. Looks like a good crowd, David says, coming over to stand by the railing with me. Folks like things that are well built and brand new. You're still talking in metaphors, he said, laughing. Force of habit. Sarah from the office comes up with what looks like blueprints. She says, Mr. Mitchell, the Whitman Group loved the presentation. They want to move forward immediately. Of course they do. I grab the rolls of paper. I see Sandra Whitman's name signed at the bottom of the page. Living well is the best revenge. The group gets larger, discussions forming like pillars holding up the walls of a house. Mrs. Henderson is talking about gardening with Marcus's wife, while Tom and Chris are debating barbecue techniques as their kids run around on the dock. Hey, you got mail, Jessica says, holding up an envelope. From Nick's new Seattle address. I took it and let it fall into the water without opening it. You don't want to know? She asks. I only want to know when it's done. Mark calls everyone to dinner, and we all take our seats at the long tables we set up. I sit at the head of the table. A toast, David offers, holding up his glass, to new beginnings. And strong foundations, I chime in, getting some laughs from the people around me that now speak architect. The conversation goes on, and although we talk about this and that, nobody mentions Clara or Nick. The neighborhood watch program is a lot better now that you're in charge, Mrs. Henderson says, chewing. A lot more comprehensive. She smiled at that, clutching her phone. Everything needs to be documented, I say, glancing back at Marcus. When the sun goes down, someone lights a portable fire pit. The warmth of the flames replaces the heat of the sun, and soon children are roasting marshmallows, and the adults are splitting into smaller groups to talk. "You're different," Sarah comments as she comes to stand next to me at the railing. "More architectural?" She grinned. I was going to say present. The lights at the marina began to come on one by one, illuminating the water below. "Hey," David says, returning with a couple of fresh drinks. "When you started rebuilding, we thought you might—" "Break?" I say, straightening my tie, staring into the fire pit. "The thing about architects, David, is we know that everything that falls can be rebuilt." The party ends, and everyone says goodbye. Jessica organizes the carpooling, and Richard helps with the barbecues. "Same time next month?" Mark says. "Different spot," I reply. "We should be ready to show you around the Whitman complex." When everyone else had gone home, I stood on the pier, looking out at the moonlit ocean. I received a final email from Clara's lawyer, asking about the sale of the house. I deleted it without reading. I took a deep breath of the salty sea air mixed with the scent of wood smoke from the fire, and thought about the future. There were new projects to work on, new buildings to design, new houses to fill with people. The wind blew at my
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.